The retirement number people hear in 2026 is $1.46 million. That's the amount Americans told Northwestern Mutual they think they need to retire comfortably. And if you're anywhere near that number, congratulations. But if you're not, that number may be doing something quietly useless to you. Because a giant final target doesn't tell you what your money is doing right now. It doesn't tell you whether your current balance is dead weight, early momentum, or a real second engine. So in this video, we're going to use a different question. Not how much do I need someday? The better question is, who's doing more of the work this year? You or the balance? That one question changes the whole video. The $1.46 million number is useful as a warning light. The Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances is often summarized with a median retirement balance of about $185,000 for households ages 55 to 64. And the IRS says the main 401k employee contribution limit for 2026 is $24,500. Those numbers can make the average person feel like the whole game is already lost, but they also hide a more useful truth. A portfolio doesn't wait until $1.46 million to begin changing your life. It changes roles in stages. Start with $100,000. Using a long-term example return of 7%, that balance would produce about $7,000 in a year before fees, taxes, and market swings. Using a 10% example, it would produce about $10,000. That's roughly $583 to $833 a month of account output. Now meet Maya. She's fictional, but the math is ordinary. Maya is 42, has $118,000 invested, and contributes $750 a month. That's $9,000 a year from her paycheck. At a 7% example return, her account's annual output is about $8,260. At a 10% example return, it's about $11,800. Maya is not rich. She can't retire on that. She shouldn't pretend the market sends her a smooth check every month, but for the first time, her balance is in the same conversation as her own annual effort. That's the first turn. That's why this lens is useful. A final retirement number is like a destination address. It may be correct, but it doesn't tell you whether the engine is running, whether the fuel is leaking, or whether you're still pushing the car by hand. Annual account output is more like a dashboard gauge. It gives you a reading you can use this year. This is why the account versus worker question matters. If Maya only compares $118,000 to $1.46 million, she feels tiny. If she compares $118,000 to the $9,000 she's adding this year, she sees something different. The balance has begun to take a shift. Now move to the next comparison. The IRS limit for employee 401k contributions in 2026 is $24,500. Spread across a year, that's about $2,042 a month. For a lot of households, that number is not just hard, it's impossible. So ask the question backwards. What balance would need to exist for the account's example output to match that legal contribution ceiling? At 10%, the number is $245,000. At 7%, it's $350,000. Different assumptions, same idea. The balance starts competing with the maximum new dollars a worker can personally add to that kind of account. That doesn't make $245,000 or $350,000 magic. It makes them operating markers. Below that zone, your paycheck is usually still the main engine. Near that zone, the account starts doing work that looks large even next to serious contributions. This is also why monthly thinking can be misleading. A worker sees $2,042 a month and thinks, I can't do that. But the account doesn't think monthly. The account just has a base and a rate. At a certain base, even an uneven long-term return can create annual output that looks impossible when you picture it coming only from a paycheck. This also makes the video less judgmental. Two people can have the same $100,000 invested and live in completely different worlds. One can add $200 a month, one can add $750, one can max out a plan. The account output lens doesn't pretend those lives are equal. It simply gives each person the same scoreboard. What does the balance produce? What can I add? And what drag is taking a bite before the next stage? And this is where the emotional part gets strange, because crossing an important math line may feel like absolutely nothing. Your statement changes, your life doesn't. Groceries don't get cheaper because your account hits six figures. Your car repair doesn't care about your annualized return. Fidelity's Q1 2026 retirement analysis shows the weirdness clearly. Average 401k balances dipped to $141,000, down 4% from the prior quarter because markets moved. At the same time, total 401k savings rates reached a record 14.4%. So a person can be doing the right thing and still feel stalled. Contributions move in straight lines, markets move in jagged lines, life moves in monthly bills. That's why the middle stage feels so slow. The math can be improving while the feeling hasn't caught up. This matters because one ugly year can hide several good decisions. A saver may add money all year, open the statement, and see a balance that barely moved. That doesn't mean the contributions failed. It means the market price and the saving habit were being measured on the same screen, even though they move on different clocks. In that same Fidelity data, nearly 1 in 5 401k participants increased their savings rate in Q1 2026, while only 5.7% changed their asset allocation. That's not a guarantee of success, but it does show something important. Many savers kept working the boring lever while markets were making the account feel worse. Go back to Maya. If she pauses because the account doesn't feel exciting, she loses more than 2 years of contributions. She also loses 2 years when the balance was finally big enough to do noticeable work. The pause doesn't just remove money, it delays the account's next job. If Maya keeps adding $9,000 a year, a rough 5-year example puts her around $217,000 at 7%, or around $245,000 at 10% before fees and taxes. The 10% example puts her near the contribution ceiling comparison. The 7% example doesn't. That's the point of showing a range. The exact date is uncertain, but the job is clear. Create a stay close enough to the curve that the next stage can happen. That's the non-obvious part. The fragile stage is not always when someone has nothing invested. The fragile stage can be right after the account begins working, when the progress is real but still easy to interrupt. And the thing that hurts most in that stage is drag. Fees, leaks, pauses, loans, withdrawals, high-interest debt pulling cash away. Any one item can look small in isolation. Together they act like a tax on acceleration. The SEC's Investor.gov has a simple example. Take $100,000 growing at 4% annually for 20 years. With a 0.25% annual fee, the hypothetical portfolio ends near $208,000. With a 1% annual fee, it ends near $179,000. Same starting money, same growth assumption, roughly $29,000 of difference. The point is not that every fee is bad or every advisor is useless. That's too simple. The point is that a small annual drag doesn't just remove this year's fee, it removes the growth that fee could have earned for every year after that. The useful question is not, can I make everything free? Sometimes people pay for advice because they need planning, behavior coaching, tax coordination, or help avoiding bigger mistakes. The useful question is, what am I paying and what problem is it solving? If the answer is vague, the fee becomes harder to defend during the stage when the account's output still needs protection. For Maya, a 1% annual drag on $118,000 is $1,180 a year, or about $98 a month. That may sound manageable. But remember the question, who's doing the work this year, Maya or the balance? If Maya's account output at 7% is about $8,260, then $1,180 of drag is a meaningful slice of that output. That's why the middle stage is not only about saving more, it's about protecting the account's work from being claimed before it can become next year's base. The balance is trying to build a bigger balance, drag keeps stepping in line first. One more comparison makes the shape visible. Fidelity's Q1 2026 page put the average 401k balance at $141,000 across its plans. Kiplinger, summarizing Fidelity's Q1 data, reported that savers in the same 401k continuously for 10 years averaged $450,800, and continuous 15-year savers averaged $600,700. Those are averages, not promises. Higher earners and steady workers can pull those numbers up, but the direction matters. The people who stay in the system long enough don't just have more deposits, they have more years where the balance itself gets bigger and more useful. So don't hear those long-term saver numbers as destiny, hear them as shape. They come from people who remained in plans, kept balances alive, and had enough income to participate. That's not everyone, but the shape still teaches the core lesson. Time inside the system lets the account move from stored savings toward annual production. This is the trap and the opportunity. Your account may change jobs before your life changes feelings. If you miss that, you may treat the middle stage like a boring waiting room, but it isn't only waiting, it's where the machine starts to turn. So what should you actually do with this idea? Not panic, not chase returns, not treat $100,000, $245,000, or $350,000 like universal commands. Use them as a control room. The framework has 5 parts. First, multiply your invested balance by a conservative example and a central example like 7% and 10%, while remembering real returns won't arrive smoothly. Second, compare that output with what you're actually adding each year. Third, compare it with the $24,500 401k employee limit if that limit applies to you. Fourth, subtract obvious drag, like fund costs, advisory fees, high-interest debt, or money being pulled out. Fifth, name the job your account is doing. That last step matters because different stages need different language. If the balance output is tiny, the word may be build. If the output is nearing your contributions, the word may be accelerate. If the output is meaningful, the word may be protect. If drag is taking too much of the output, the word may be simplify. None of those words tells you what investment to buy. They tell you what kind of problem you're looking at. For Maya, the answer is not I'm done or I'm behind. The answer is more useful. My balance is becoming an early second engine, and my main job is to keep it from losing momentum. That's a different feeling. It's not hype, it's orientation. Someone with $50,000 invested can use the same lens. At 7 to 10%, the example output is $3,500 to $5,000 a year. Someone with $100,000 sees $7,000 to $10,000. Someone with $250,000 sees $17,500 to $25,000. The numbers rise, but the question stays the same. Take a smaller example. A viewer with $80,000 invested who adds $300 a month is adding $3,600 a year. At 7 to 10%, the example account output is $5,600 to $8,000 before fees, taxes, and volatility. That doesn't mean the viewer can relax, but it does mean the account may already be doing more annual work than the new deposits. For that viewer, the next question may not be, why am I so far from a million? It may be, how do I keep this output from leaking? What does the balance produce? What am I adding? What's draining the output? That's the audit. It doesn't tell you which fund to buy. It doesn't tell you whether to hire or fire anyone. It gives you a cleaner way to read the statement you already have. The final retirement number asks, am I done? For most people, the answer is no, and then the conversation dies. The better number asks, what's doing the work? That question creates a next step. So by the end of this, don't leave with a magic number. Leave with a decision lens, account output minus drag plus new contributions plus time equals the next stage. That's the machine. Some years it will sound quiet, some years it will shake, some years it will move backwards on paper. But the job is to understand what part of the machine you can actually control. The $1.46 million headline may still matter, but it's not the first useful number. The first useful number is the point where your balance begins to show up next to your own effort. Once you can see that, retirement math stops being only a mountain in the distance. It becomes a question you can ask this year, right now. This also protects you from two bad emotions. One is despair, where the final target is so far away that every deposit feels pointless. The other is false comfort, where any rising balance feels like proof that everything is fine. Both emotions create bad timing. Despair can make someone stop right when the account is beginning to matter. False comfort can make someone ignore leaks right when leaks become expensive. The account job test sits between those extremes. It says progress is real, but it still has to be measured against contribution room, drag, time, and risk. It turns one giant emotional question into a smaller operating question, which is much easier to use when markets, bills, and headlines are all yelling at the same time. Use the lens before making any big interpretation. Before changing investments, ask whether the change improves the machine or only makes the statement feel more exciting. Before pausing contributions, ask whether the pause is temporary survival or a quiet delay. Before paying a fee, ask what value comes back. Before chasing a higher return, ask whether the real issue is return, contribution room, or drag. That short pause can keep a normal person from treating every account balance as either a victory parade or a disaster. And that question is simple enough to remember the next time you open your account. Who's doing the work this year? You or the balance? If the answer is still mostly you, that doesn't mean failure. It means the job is acceleration. If the answer is starting to be the balance, the job is protection. If drag is taking too much of the output, the job is cleanup. The point is not to feel rich. The point is to know what stage you're actually in. If this helped, like the video, comment with the number you want to test in the account job framework, and subscribe for more clear money explainers. Thanks.